Mount retainment can be one of the more tricky elements of jiu-jitsu, especially if you're new, and you probably don't understand how tricky it is until you've actually tried it and failed. Well, in the 9 years that I've been training jiu-jitsu, I've been able to collect some very reliable, some very easy to use techniques that'll help take your mount retainment to the next level. Let's jump in. Number one, lifting the elbows. Now, the most common mount escape that people learn right away is the knee elbow escape. And this can be a very difficult mount escape to stop. I can still remember the first time someone performed the knee elbow escape when I was in mount, and it felt effortless for them. There was nothing I could do to stop it. The best thing you can do, as you can see in this example, is get your hands scooped under their elbows and lift up. And this is something that you should be relatively quick about. I don't want this person to set their elbow, turn to their side, then set their knee. I mean, if they get their knee involved, they're pretty much out at that point. So once I feel their elbow prepping the position, my same side hand will reach down with a scoop grip and I will lift up. And if I have to do this 100 times, I will do it 100 times. Oftentimes you will scoop someone's elbow up and out and they will just reset and try to do it again. That's fine. One way you can really get in your opponent's head is just continuously remove their elbow from the situation, and eventually they're going to give up on it because they're not getting anywhere. We truly don't need to go into a lot of detail on this one because it is just that simple. If you scoop the elbow, you're stopping them in their tracks in the beginning or the initiation of that movement. You start focusing on that, and I'm positive your mount retainment will increase. And I want to take a second to give my sponsor, X Martial, a shout out. Now, I've been doing jiu-jitsu a long time, almost a decade, 9 years. And I can tell you that when you find high quality no-gi gear, it's gold. This stuff is thick. They've got great design teams. These designs are not ironed on, so they're not gonna fall apart after a couple tournaments, after a couple washes, after a couple open mats. These are gonna stand the test of time. You buy through X Martial and you can keep your favorite no-gi top or shorts for years and years to come. Aside from having great pricing on all their products, it's also very comfortable. It fits well. You wanna look good when you're on the mats. You wanna feel proud of the person that you've built and the way you put yourself together. And your no-gi attire definitely plays a part in that. I know if I go compete, I want to look my best. So if you want to look as good as me and probably even better, go over to xmartial.com and grab yourself some gear. I can promise you that you won't be disappointed. All right, let's jump back to the video. Number two, your positioning of your feet. Now, oftentimes I see people, especially new people, white belts, sitting on the balls of their feet when they're in mount, as you can see in this example. This leaves an open and available hook for my opponent to utilize to formulate escapes. What I really want to do is put the shoelace section of my foot flat against the mat. And then from there, what I want to do is I want to turn my feet or my toes into my opponent so that they're tucked underneath his body. Even if he is able to get to his side from the knee elbow escape, if my feet or toes stay under that bottom thigh, this is going to be very difficult for him to get around. It also makes it very difficult for them to be able to grab onto your leg, whether it be with a hand or a foot, to put it into a position to help them initiate a mount escape. If you can keep your toes tucked, your mount retainment will go up. Along with your foot placement, let's talk about what you should be doing with your legs or your hooks. What I like to do is scoop my legs underneath. I get the tops of my knees flat on the mat. This allows me to drive optimal pressure through my hips into his body. For him to bridge, he needs to be able to place his feet on the mat, and then his hips are popping up as a power point, right? If you keep his feet off the mat, it makes it very difficult for him to bridge. Also, by utilizing your own body weight and your leverage to press your hips into his, it removes some of the power he has to drive his hips up. Remember, in the bottom position, if he wants to bridge up, he not only has to fight you, he has to fight gravity. If you're on top, you're only fighting him. Sometimes what I like to pay attention to is if my opponent is really powerful, bridging one way or another. Let's say, for example, he bridges really hard to my left. What I like to do is I like to get a scarf hold or an underhook with my hand underneath his neck with my right hand, and then I will hook with my leg so that I can apply downward pressure through my right hip into his left hip, which would be his power hip. From there, I utilize my left leg in a folded fashion, almost like a kickstand on a bike. So even if he is able to power through my hip pressure, he now has to also power through my kickstand. And something that I want you to keep in mind is that you don't have to necessarily staple his body to the mat 100% of the time. He still will be able to move a little bit. What you want to focus on is keeping him there, right? If he comes off the ground a little bit, if he can move a little bit, that's fine. If you think about it, you're in a great position to hold while he is in a position to escape. So if you're using good technique and good mechanics, this is not only a great place to hold your opponent down, it's a great place to catch your breath while your opponent works to get out, thus burning more energy, thus getting his heart rate up, thus losing his breath. I know that as white belts, sometimes you guys can write off the mount because it doesn't work, right? I did that. I stopped doing the mount until I was probably halfway through my blue belt because I thought it didn't work. It's not that it doesn't work, it's just that I wasn't doing it correctly. So try to stay patient with yourself because this is a dominant position for a reason. And you don't even necessarily need to master the position to be good at it. You just need to have the functional basics down and it'll work really, really well for you. The third piece of the puzzle is spine control. And if you remember anything from this video, I want it to be this. We as human beings are designed to be strong when our spines are straight. This is something that I've talked about in prior videos, a concept that really works well in Jiu Jitsu. But in weightlifting, right? If I'm going to squat my very best, I need to have a straight spine. If I'm going to deadlift my very best, I need to have a straight spine. The second you start putting a bend or a twist in someone's spine, you begin to remove their strength or their ability to move. Think about what someone's spine looks like when they're pressed into the ground flat. Their spine's in a nice neutral position. They're in a great place to launch a really powerful bridge. Well, what can you do to thwart that, to reduce their effectiveness? Well, I really like the scarfold position. One arm underneath the neck. If I can put a little bit of a bend in your spine, I'm gonna take away a little bit of your power. Now, the best part about this isn't necessarily the fact that I can bend someone's head slightly forward because my arm is underneath it. It's the fact that I control their head and which way their face is looking. If you pay attention next time you're training, someone bridges underneath you, they will always look in the direction that they're bridging because their spine needs to be straight. If you look at this very simple example, I'm using my one hand to hold my partner's face down in one direction. I'm then telling him to bridge the opposite way. There is quite literally almost no power when they bridge in the opposite direction. Now, if you have this person look in the direction that they want to bridge, there's a lot of power there. We can use this concept to our advantage. So if I'm sparring with someone, if I'm competing and I can tell you have a really strong bridge to my left, well, guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna work to pin your face to my right. I'm gonna make you face the direction that you don't really wanna go, right? I'm leaving an opening to your weak side and I'm taking away your strong side. I'm doing this by applying strong chest and shoulder pressure through the scarfold position. If you can control where someone's looking, you can control where they bridge. And once you've done this enough, you will develop or understand which side you favor. And if you have a favorite side, maybe you're stronger dropping your right hip into your opponent rather than your left hip. Well, guess what? You would face your opponent's face to your left, and then you're dropping your right hip into his left hip, which is his power hip. That's the hip that comes up in the air and bridges him over. And just like the previous tips, this is a very simple yet extremely effective technique. When I learned this and I applied it, I had this really big aha moment. Like, I can't believe I've been struggling through mount retainment this whole time when this one little move was here. And honestly, this is one of the best parts of Jiu Jitsu because we constantly run into problem areas where we don't know the answer, or we feel like things don't work. When they do work, the answer has been there the whole time. We just haven't discovered it yet. I like to focus my Jiu Jitsu on simple techniques that work really, really well. I think if you start incorporating this one into your mount retainment, you're gonna see just how good it is. All right, last but not least, smother chokes, AKA mother's milk. Now, one thing I constantly hear white belts say is they don't know how to submit people from the mount position. Arm bars are difficult, head and arm triangles are difficult, mounted triangles are difficult. Let me start off by telling you that every submission is gonna be slightly difficult to really difficult, depending on your natural ability, when you first learn it. If I can give you any advice, stop expecting anything to be easy the first day that you learn it. You have to be with a technique or a submission for a while before it starts to feel easy, before it flows, before it's smooth and you hit it without thinking about it, right? If you're constantly expecting submissions or techniques to be easy on day one, you're setting yourself up for failure, and that's a promise. You have to be patient with yourself. You have to learn to rep these things out, right? Once you do that, you're gonna see all kinds of success. Now, if I can be totally transparent with you, I've only been working smother chokes for probably the last year, and really coming to see just how simple they are to get to. They almost feel like cheating. Now, before we jump into the how-to, let's talk about the parts of your torso that you can use to make this happen. We can use our shoulder area, our pec, our sternum, and even the side of our neck. Now, I do like to touch on the self-defense aspect of most of the moves I talk about, and I would say 3 out of the 4 locations that you use of your body to smother someone else would be great for self-defense. The one I would never do would be my neck, because obviously your opponent can bite. Right? I don't care if you bite my shoulder, if you bite my pec, or if you try to bite my sternum, that's not gonna do anything. But if I'm trying to smother you with my neck, there's a lot of soft tissue right here, and there's some vessels that carry some really important blood, and a lot of it. So I would never, in a self-defense scenario, try to smother someone with my neck, because it would just be too easy to bite into that. With that said, it's pretty simple to make this happen. All I need to do is obtain top mount. I get a scarf hold wrapped. And then from here, I'm rocking his head into the center of the body part that I want to use, whether it be my shoulder, my pec, my sternum, or in a jiu-jitsu setting, only my neck. From here, once I have his head placed where I want it, I then incorporate the other arm that isn't scarf holding. And I do this by reaching across with that arm and grabbing onto his body. Now, if I can find my other elbow, awesome, even better. And once my hands are in place, I'm going to apply a tight squeeze with my lats, almost like I'm hugging. I'm also going to rock my body forward a little bit, right? If I apply that forward pressure, it's gonna take the squeeze aspect of this up a notch. If I'm only focusing on squeezing with no forward pressure, it's really not gonna be as good. So you set your hands, you get a nice tight hug, squeezing with your lats, both arms incorporated, rock your body forward and focus on pressing that body part, whether it's your shoulder, chest, sternum, or neck, square into his face. Keep in mind that you will have to be a little bit patient. You're probably not gonna get an instant tap on this unless he's very, very tired. But if you hold it, and oftentimes if you listen, you can hear them struggle breathing. And if I can hear you struggle breathing, okay, now I know I got you. I'm gonna hold it nice and tight. And just like we talked about with our chokes in previous videos, a nice, slow, increasing pressure or increasing squeeze. That way I'm not blowing my grips or gassing myself out if it's set wrong and I'm squeezing at 100% intensity right out of the gate. If I start slow and work to build my intensity, it will make this a lot more effective. Now, the nice thing about this submission is that I tend to get a panic response from this. Normally, when people are trying to escape mount, their arms are a bit lower, right? They're trying to push my hips down. They're trying to do the knee elbow escape. And my body is close to theirs, which makes it very difficult for them to bring their hands back up and address the choke. So you set this choke in motion, they realize they have to stop what they're doing, whether it's a knee elbow escape, whether it's some kind of a bridge escape, whatever it is, and they have to bring their hands up to deal with the smother choke. But by the time they do that, you've already set it and you're probably already applying a good amount of pressure. And at that point, it's basically too late. At the end of the day, the only way to get good at it is just to practice it, have fun with it. You're probably gonna mess it up a bunch of times. Now, there is one element that we can talk about before we close out the video, and that's that pocket of air I referenced in a previous video. We all have this bubble around our face, very small, that we draw air from. And if you can interrupt that pocket of air, you can really make it difficult for them to breathe. So you don't necessarily have to close off someone's breathing completely to make their life difficult, right? And I've even had people submit just because their breathing is interrupted. They're so out of breath and they can't get the amount of oxygen they need because that bubble of oxygen is interrupted, that people will tap to that. Now, obviously, the higher up you go in the belt ranking system, the less you're gonna see it, but there's something that you can play with. And it's something that you can use to gas your opponent out, which if I can't get a submission, I'm gonna try to gas you out because the more tired you get, the less effective you're gonna be at fighting me. So something to think about moving forward, guys. If you have anything to add to the video, you have any of your own go-tos, drop it in the comments. I always love reading through those. You guys know that I'm not the only teacher here. You guys drop some awesome knowledge in the comments and I always appreciate you guys that contribute. So with that being said, you know how we like to end them. Sometimes backwards, always forwards. I'll see you in the next one.